I've played Twilight Inscription 3 times now, and my opinion of it has drastically changed since my first playthrough. Let's talk about it.
What does that even mean, Bowers Game Corner?
Ahoy there, YouTube! I'm back again today for another game review, and today I'm very excited to be talking about Twilight Inscription from Fantasy Flight Games. This is for 1 to 8 players, taking 90 to 120 minutes to play, and Twilight Inscription is a massive roll and write game set in the Twilight Imperium universe. Now, starting off, I absolutely adore Twilight Imperium. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and I did a Thoughts from the Corner on this, where we thought it was a pretty good to very good to potentially great game. We were somewhere around the board after our first 6-player gameplay. However, now I've tried it at both the 2-player count, a solo game, and a 6-player game, and I'm going to give my thoughts on it. But first, let's take you down to the table and show you a little bit how it works. Alrighty then, so I'm going to try and give you a feel for the game. The first thing you're going to do is need to set up this Mecatol Rex board out in the center. This is going to be because you're trying to race to Mecatol Rex on one of your boards. Also, there's going to be some other various different things surrounding this board, including some objectives that you can try and do on each one of your 4 boards: expansion, navigation, warfare, and industry. The first person to do these is going to get the points on the left, and then once they do it, you'll flip it over, and then everybody else can do it, but they're going to only get less points. Also up here, you're going to have some of these, which are different votes that you're going to have throughout the game. We'll talk more about those later. And these cards right here, which are some adventures that you can go on as you navigate through space. Once again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Give the speaker card to whoever is most experienced with the game. It is double-sided. It will help you when you get to council events. And make sure everybody has a player reference cards, which are super stinking useful. We'll talk more about that later. Next, everyone is going to get 3 of these factions right here. And all the factions have their lore on the back, but on the front is the important information. Everyone's going to have a top ability, which will let them do something, most of the time at the very beginning of the game. Sometimes it'll say setup. And then on the bottom, each one is going to have a little symbol right there, and then something they can do. And that's a symbol that you'll be able to cross out on your boards over here. But let's talk about these 4 boards, because these are really the star of the show, and every player is going to have 4 of these boards. Now, the first board we're going to talk about is your navigation board. You're going to start on your home planet, which will be circled down here. And then how it works is you're going to spend dice. And we'll talk about spending dice a little bit later, but there's listed right here. You're either going to explore or you're going to claim systems. When you explore a system, you're going to draw an orange line. And when you claim a system, you're going to circle it and then collect whatever is there. So for instance, if I was to claim this right here, I would then be able to get a planet on one of my other boards, which I'll show you in a second. These are victory points. These are resources, which will help you in a variety of different ways. This symbol means you get to draw a card, which will send you on a nuts adventure through outer space that only you get to do and gain you victory points. And then, of course, we have Mecatol Rex up here, which you'd be racing to get. 2, because the first person to get there is going to get more points than the second person to get there, and the third person to get there, and so on and so forth. Now, there's also a lot of other information on this board. Some stuff I want to spotlight are the 2 texts down here, and you can spend your dice to hopefully work towards getting technology, and each board has their own special tech that they can utilize. So on everybody's board, there's going to be 8 total technology that they could potentially try and upgrade. Also down here are some little slots that you can fill in with your marker that are going to tell you that you can utilize some of the other fancy dice, because you always get to use the black dice here, but if you mark on these little spots, then you'll be able to start using the blue dice, the green dice, the red dice. Over here we have scorekeeping stuff, which actually makes the scorekeeping really simple at the end of the game. So navigation is all about getting you planets and allowing you to explore. Navigation is really heavily tied to this next board right here, which is the expansion board, because as you expand and gain these planets, it allows you to start marking off the planet symbol on these boards down here, and then you can start coming to these planets and start marking off all the symbols on the planet. And if you can cross out an entire row or an entire column, so for instance, if I were to take out that, and that, I would then earn this. So it's kind of like a Connect 4 type of thing. Now, this can look very daunting because there's lots of different symbols and symbology, but once again, everything is on the player reference card, and it's really quite simple to understand once you get flowing. And you'll notice that this board is a great spot to get those tech upgrades, because if you could get this blue, green, blue, then you would have completed this column, and that means you would gain this green symbol, and then you could turn around and use that green symbol to get you the neural motivator. Or maybe you could get psychoarchaeology on the industry board. But that's what you're going to be doing on the expansion board. The next board we need to talk about is warfare. And on the warfare board, you're going to be building these different units over here on the left side, and the cost to build the units is listed right here. And once again, so shocker, it's the dice face, and they match up. Once again, you'll have two texts up here, and it's pretty simple. How it works is you're going to go through 4 different warfare phases. And at the beginning of each warfare phase, you are going to essentially draw a line on here, and then you're going to count up all the different dots that you have in your bottom area or your middle area here. And you're going to compare that with the person on your left and the person on your right, and you will either gain the bonus if you beat them in war, or lose points if you lost in war. But the catch is, you never quite know when warfare is going to happen because you're not sure which event cards are going to come up next. And don't worry, we'll talk about the event cards in a second, and all this should get much, much cleaner and clearer. Last but not least, we have the industry board. And this one looks really super daunting, but it's actually not. When you choose the industry board, once again, you use the dice, and you're either going to put X's or circles on this area right here. The rule is, if you want to put a circle down, you have to have an X near it. When you circle something, you guessed it, you get that symbol, and that symbol is going to do a variety of different things. The bottom part of this board is really where you can score a boatload of points. So let's say I were to circle this red little symbol right here. That means I'd also mark off this one. And if I can mark off all the ones in this row and the one in this row, I'll start to get this symbol down here. So let's show you real quick. So let's pretend that I circled this yellow right here. I would now mark off this bottom yellow, and you go from left to right, which means I would now get this trade good. Now, I don't get a trade good immediately, but I'll get a trade good when we get a trade good event phase. Likewise, if I marked out these next 3 right here, I would now start gaining 2 trade goods when we get to these trade good events, which once again in this event deck right here. And these trade goods, they'll get you 1 victory point at the end of the game for every 2. But what makes them even more valuable is you can use a trade good on any symbol on any one of your boards as long as you activate it. But now, and there's also some voting on here as well, which works much the same way. Whenever you get a specific symbol on your board, you'll start to get to mark down here. And then when we get to a voting council phase, that's how many votes you're going to get. And so you put the votes over here, and then you can actually spend the votes on galactic events. But let's talk about what a core game flow, like one round, is actually going to look like. And it's going to look like this. Every single time, you're just going to flip over one of these cards, and a couple different things are happening. Now, most of the time, it's going to be a strategy card. And how this works is you read the card right here. You're going to know that during this particular round, you are going to be able to utilize this symbol, and this symbol. Knowing that, you're then going to choose one of your 4 boards, which will be spread out. You'll decide which one you want to do. You put your marker on it. That's how we do it. We find it the easiest way. And once everyone at the table has decided which of their 4 boards they're going to utilize, you roll these 6 dice here. You roll them up, and everybody gets to use the black symbols. So you'd be guaranteed this time to be able to use these 6 symbols on your board. However, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, if you happen to have, say, marked this one right here, then you would always get to use the blue die, but only on the industry board. You wouldn't get to do it on the expansion board because you haven't marked the blue die down here. And that's really the crux of it. So now you're going to spend your resources, you'll mark your different things out, and then once everyone's done that, you flip over another card and you rinse, wash, and repeat. Now, most of the time, you're going to get these strategy cards, and for this one, you'd see you have the 3 red. Everyone's going to pick which board they do. You roll the dice, and you rinse, wash, and repeat. But let's talk about some of the other special events that are going to come up. So first, we had the warfare one. You'll have a war during, I believe it is 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, so you'll have a war during phases 2, 3, 4, and 5. And once again, it's a really simple phase. It'll tell you exactly what to do in here. Advance the deployment line, which means you're going to then draw a line right through here because now you're going to be fighting in this quadrant. And then you just count up all your dots. For the player on your left, you're going to count up how many dots you have here. For the player on your right, you're going to count up the dots here. If you beat your opponent, you gain the good stuff. If you don't beat them, then you gain the bad stuff. And if you tie, nobody gains anything. And that's what one of these warfare cards looks like. And once you're done with that, you'll just move on to the next phase, which most likely will be strategy. Now, the other events that will come up are production, and I believe it's called diplomacy. So production, once again, really simple. You're going to claim one trade good on industry for each unlocked icon on your chart, which once again, for me, that would mean I would gain 2 claimed goods. If I was all the way over here and I'd fill all this stuff in, I might be gaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 potential claimed goods. And once again, that's really good because that's like having 6 of any die face when I want to turn these in. The last event that you're going to have are, what are they? The council ones, which once again work very similar. You're going to claim a vote on the industry track for as many of these have you filled in, and then you're going to flip over one of these galactic event cards. Everybody's going to vote, and you have a nice little spot to vote on here, and depending on the outcome of the vote, you're going to resolve the vote. Now, the thing with this is really interesting is you actually spend your votes, so you will lose them as you progress through the game. But you're going to do that over the course of 25 rounds, and after 25 rounds, you'll total up your score, which will actually be really easy to do, surprisingly, and whoever has the most points is the winner of the game. And that, in a nutshell, is how you're going to play Twilight Inscription. Alrighty then, Twilight Inscription from Fantasy Flight Games. What are my final thoughts? Let's go over the pros, let's go over the cons. First, on the con side, I'm not quite sure 100% who this game is for. Now, I am going to say it's for me, but this is not going to be for everybody. First and foremost, if you're expecting the Twilight experience in a roll and write game, this one's not really going to satisfy your appetite. This is a heck of a game, and I think it's a great game, not to bury the lead, but it's not Twilight Imperium shrunk down, which I think is what a lot of people are going to be expecting. That being said, you are going to be dipped into the Twilight Imperium universe, and you're going to recognize a lot of the iconography, a lot of the symbology, a lot of the core gameplay elements of, oh, I got my War Sun out, and I'm going to, be voting on this council agenda and stuff like that. But you do need to know that it's not apples to apples here. Also on the con side, this game is as slow as the slowest person every single turn. Now, you're going to have essentially 25 turns in this game, 25 events that are going on. Now, that being said, they're not all going to take the same amount of time because some of them are votes, some of them are warfare, some of them are just you collecting goods based on how your engine is going on the board down here. But you are going to have a lot of strategy phases. And these strategy phases, if you're playing quickly and other people at the table are not playing quickly, can really drag. I'm the kind of person who doesn't think about my choices a lot in life, in particular in Twilight Inscription, and so I'm done relatively early. In every single strategy round, and I'm not exaggerating here, I would probably have between 1 to 5 minutes of downtime in between. I had that terrible situation at one point where you go upstairs, well, at least in my case, you go upstairs to go to the bathroom, then you come back down and expect it to be at the next round, and it's not the next round. It's still that round, and you're like, oh, come on. Now, that will happen as you go to the higher player counts, and it will go up to 8 players. And I will say, I don't think I'm probably going to recommend this at the higher player counts unless everybody is on relatively similar footing with their knowledge of the game. If you're playing with newer players at the larger player count and more experienced players, I think there's definitely going to be some dragging in between turns, and you need to know that. Which, spoiler alert, doesn't come into play nearly as much at the solo and 2-player count, at the lower player counts, which is a good thing, but we're continuing on with the cons. Any other cons that I have with this? I'd like to see a couple more agenda voting cards in here. There's only 4 per phase, and I definitely think that there were more, a little bit more varied. That would make the game a little bit better. And most of my other cons with this game are really that I would just love to see a little bit more variety from here to there in the events mostly, because you're going to deal with a lot of strategy cards, and I imagine as they expand this game, and I really, really hope they expand this game, as I'm going to tell you when we get to the pros, you're just going to see the same things over and over again. And honestly, when you get to strategy events, there's nothing special. They all just say the same thing. You're going to get these 3 symbols. You're going to pick which board you're going to do. You're going to roll the dice, and then you're going to do your thing. I would love to see some more crazy, varied, mixed events mixed in there. And it would be really simple, like just a promo pack of these cards, and you could interweave them in there. I think that would be fantastic. And I imagine they'll do more stuff like that in the future. But I'll be bluntly honest here. I am really stretching on the cons here, because once you get past the fact that this isn't Twilight Imperium in a roll and write game, it kind of is, but not really. This is still a great game on its own merits, and I did not appreciate the game enough after my first playthrough. And now that I've played through 2 additional times, I am a really big fan of this game, and I will be keeping this game in my collection. And where do I start on why I enjoy the game? First and foremost, I think, is that the flow of the game is very, very simple. As I said, you're going to flip over one of these cards and you're going to follow the directions on the cards. The cards tell you exactly what to do. They've used their symbology and their use of space really well. The speaker card has useful information on the back. The player reference cards have all the symbols that you're going to see on here, and they come with 8 of them because it does go up to 8 players. And I love just how simple it is. Pretty much on your turn, it's like, which board am I going to choose? Am I going to explore deeper into the galaxy? Because that can be really, really good, because that's going to allow you to earn more planets, which then you can expand onto. And as you expand onto these planets, you're going to be able to start marking out different things and gaining all these different symbols. And you'll be like, oh, I kind of want that symbol, because that symbol is then going to trigger this. And as my buddy Adam put it, there's lots of cascading things that will happen, especially depending on your faction here, where you'll be like, oh, if I mark this, that's going to mean that I do this, which is going to mean that I can do this, which means I can do this. And it's really cool because everybody's doing that simultaneously. And that's one thing I really do appreciate about this game over the original Twilight Imperium, is the downtime between your turn, typically Twilight Imperium, would be a long time, because you do your stuff and the next person do the stuff and the next person do the stuff. In this one, everybody's marking on their board simultaneously. Now, that still can take a while sometime, but I do like that aspect of the game. So we have the navigation board, which lets you wander around and also explore the planets. Then you got the warfare, which I find really interesting. It has a 7 Wonders style vibe, where you're fighting against the person on your left or the person on your right. And if you're playing solo, what they've done is they've made Mecatol Rex double-sided, and they keep down of all the bookkeeping down here. And it's a really clean, simple system. And once you know how to utilize this is really easy. I'm going to shoot a solo gameplay video if you're more interested to see how it does. But if you're looking at this as a solo or 2-player game, do not be intimidated. It's actually a really simple game to learn once you start wrapping your brain around it. And they actually have this really quick play as you learn guide, where they pretty much say, hey, if you don't mind not knowing everything and kind of going as you want, as you learn, this 3-page thing actually does a great job. That being said, this is much more robust, and you will need to go to this from time to time, obviously, to learn different things. But I do want to give them kudos. I love these sort of quick start guides right here. And honestly, if you're coming back to this game, you go through this, you're going to have this thing set up in a couple minutes. That's another pro I have on this game. The setup for this is not terribly difficult. You set out your 4 boards, you shuffle some cards, you set up your events, you do a little song and dance, and boom, you're up and at 'em, which I do like. The final board that you have, we talked a little bit about the warfare. The warfare is really interesting, by the way, because you're going to be playing kind of like a little mini modified dot game as you put more dots in here, and each dot counts as power. But it also has a polyomino Tetris style thing as you're trying to fit it at all these different spots, and I do like that. Now, the last board, and undoubtedly the most intimidating board, is this one right. Where is that one? This one right here, the industry board. You look at this, you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But it's actually super stinking simple. You pretty much are either going to put X's on here or you're going to put circles on here. And if you put a circle on here, then you get to claim whatever good it is. However, you can only put a circle if it's next to an X. And that's the basic core flow of it. But that's another thing that I really want to spotlight in this review, is I love how user-friendly these boards are. The industry board right here tells you exactly what you can do with all the symbols. Likewise on the warfare board, this is what you can do with all the symbols. Likewise on the navigation board, this is what you can do with the symbols. It's all done very cleanly and very clearly. And I don't want I don't want to say there's numerous paths to victory. There are, though, but it doesn't feel like that. I love a lot of Euro games where it's kind of point salad, and you're like, I could do this, I could do that, I could do this, I could do that. I don't quite get that feel quite yet with this. I think if they added a fifth board, I could potentially get there, but that's not a negative. I always felt like there was something to do up until the end of the game. Once you get to the end of the game, it's a little bit wonky. You have this last strategy phase pretty much where you can wrap things up and min-max. And the game can feel a little weird depending on when the events come up. You might have warfare right at the beginning of the round versus right at the end of the round. But I actually do kind of like that. And that can be mitigated if you have the special faction, which, continuing on with the cons, there are 24 unique factions in the game, and each faction has 2 special abilities. One up top, which is like a big one, you'll do something crazy, and then one at the bottom, which is a little symbol, and when you cross off that symbol on one of your boards, then you get to do that unique faction special ability. And if you want to get good at this game, which I'm not, I'd highly recommend studying what your character does and trying to play towards that. I do like the fact at the beginning of the game you get 3 of these cards, and then you can kind of decide. Another thing I enjoy about the game is these are double-sided, so you can make it so that your everything is asymmetrical or everything is the same. So you can decide that at the beginning, aside from your faction abilities as well. Any other things that I like about this game? Yeah, I love these cards right here. These are like these crazy things you can find out in space, and they do all sorts of different wild stuff, but they're going to get you points. But typically, in order to get to these, you're going to have to travel really far on your navigation board, or get yourself the gravity drive, which will then let you start going through the wormholes, which is another thing that I like about this game, is the fact that it has the tech. And this is one thing I like, you really do have some interesting choices to make in this game, because you could really push towards upgrading, because you have the upgrades down on every single one of your 4 boards. You have 2 upgrades that you're going to be able to do. Likewise, you'll cross out some spots which will say, oh, now you can use these 3 extra special colored dice, because you always get to use the black dice on your turn, but now you can start using the blue or green or red dice, but you can only use them on specific boards, and you have to mark those on the boards, and it's all done very well on the boards. And at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is this. Well, I do think that this game is a little bit of a fragile game, meaning that you could have some bad experiences with this game depending on the player count, depending on the skill gap between players, depending on analysis paralysis. If you're playing this with 3 people with analysis paralysis and it's your first time playing, you might be in for quite a lengthy experience. But if you don't mind that, or if everybody's nearly on the same playing field when it comes to analysis paralysis and knowledge of the game or different things like that, or if you're playing it solo or as a 2-player game, this is a great game. I am going to keep this as a solo experience. I'm excited to go through all the different factions. I'm excited for expansions with different events and different cards and different things to vote on, and hopefully a 5th board, which I think will really send this game into the next stratosphere once it does feel a little bit more like a point salad. I could go any sort of way to win type of game. I think that's going to bump it up into the next echelon if it ever gets that. But as it stands, Twilight Inscription is a great game that I can recommend if you are a fan of heavier roll and write games, if that idea appeals to you, or if you are a solo gamer. If you're a solo gamer and you don't even like Twilight Imperium, I still recommend checking out this game, because I had an absolute blast with this as a solo game, and this is one of my new favorite solo games. Yeah, really like this one. So that is Twilight Inscription from Fantasy Flight Games. I think if I had to put a number on it, I'd say about an 8.4. I think this is a great game with the potential to go even higher in the future with some more knickknacks here and there. But if you enjoyed this review, please be sure to click on that subscribe button down below, as I'm trying to reach, I guess I should put a number. I was trying to get to 10,000. I just got to 10,000. I'm trying to hit 15,000 subscribers by the end of 2023. That sounds weird. Yeah, sure, we'll go with that. I don't know. But as always, if you enjoyed this content, do the thing, and bye-bye. This video is brought to you by all of my amazing Patreon supporters, and I would love it if you would join their ranks and have your name immortalized in the end of many of my videos for the end of time. But consider for only $1 a month, and as always, thanks for stopping by.